Russia has invaded Ukraine. The strange Bishop of Knoxville is in trouble, and the Pope gives the green light to the FSSP. We'll cover that and more on today's Crisis Weekly Wrap-Up. Today is February 25th, 2022, and I'm Eric Sammons. Well, I think everybody knows what the big news is this week, and that is that Russia has, in fact, invaded Ukraine after months of speculation that this would happen. It sounds like some of the U.S. foreign experts were correct, and I will be the first to admit that I did not think they would actually do that. Russia would not actually do this. So they got one right for the first time in probably like 30 years. But so what happened this week was on Monday, first Russia, Vladimir Putin's Russia, recognized the independence of two breakaway regions in the eastern part of Ukraine. I think this is something people really don't understand very well, what's been going on in Ukraine for quite some time, particularly the last 8 years, because in 2014, when a U.S.-backed coup happened in Ukraine and overthrew the more Russian-leaning president of Ukraine, there were some areas in the east that are predominantly ethnically Russian, and they're Russian-speaking. They didn't accept that coup, and they decided that they wanted to break away. And they've been fighting. There's actually been basically a war for 8 years in Ukraine. And I don't know how many people recognize that, but there's been a war there for 8 years. And so what's happened is Russia has declared that they will recognize the independence. And first, what Putin said was they would militarily help them. They'd move in. So that wasn't really an invasion as it had been predicted at that point. So I was like, well, okay, this is awful, but it's not exactly an invasion, and it seemed a little bit more limited. But then on Thursday, Russia ended up deciding to attack all of Ukraine, moving towards Kiev, the capital, and other areas of the western Ukraine. Now, what we don't know yet is what the long-term plan is if Russia is successful. Do they plan a full-scale occupation of Ukraine? That would be incredibly difficult for Russia to pull off. I mean, I know we might still think of them as a superpower, and they're not really a superpower. I mean, I don't want to diminish how powerful they are with all the nuclear weapons and things like that. But at the same time, an occupation of all of Ukraine would be very difficult for them to pull off. So the question is going to be, will they just put in a puppet government? Maybe reinstall the guy who was ousted back in 2014? We don't know yet what's going to happen. I do want to say this from an American perspective, that we just need to really stay out of this as far as militarily. We cannot send troops over there. That would be a disaster. When we send troops involved in the last 30 years, it almost always ends up worse than when we started. I mean, just look at Afghanistan, look at Iraq. I mean, it's not a good move. And so we really don't need our boys and girls over there fighting for their lives for this area. This does not mean that it's not terrible for Ukraine, for Ukrainian citizens. We don't want to diminish that, but it's not something that the United States has a vital interest in being involved in. Ukraine is not a NATO ally. We have no treaty obligations to them. And so I just think we really need to hope and pray for peace in that area, and also that the United States does not get involved, because nothing good can happen if there's an actual shooting war between the United States and Russia, the two most powerful nuclear countries in the world. That just, we can't have that. Okay, the other news is again from Canada. It seems like lately all the news has been Ukraine, Russia, Canada, and that is that Justin Trudeau actually did revoke the emergency act that he implemented to crack down on political dissent. And that, let's be very clear about what he did. He invoked emergency powers for himself in order to squash political opponents. There was no violence that he was trying to overcome. There was not even criminal activity really that he was trying to overcome. He simply did not like the fact that people were protesting his policies. And so he implemented this emergency act that crushed the dissent. Sure enough, the police came in. They got rid of the Ottawa police chief, got a new guy who was basically, would be proud to be a Nazi probably. And they cracked down on all the protesters in Ottawa, cleared them all out, arrested a number of them, particularly the leaders. There were scenes on social media of horses trampling over protesters and things of that nature. And so that it seems that that's over in Ottawa, at least. I know there have been some protests that have been cropping up other parts of Canada. The big question now moves to the United States. there's been talk of a freedom convoy here in the United States going from California to Washington and some other ones in other areas of the country. And there's a lot of debate among those who are supportive of the freedom convoy, like myself, about what we do about this, because they could end up being January 6th, which basically means that they will use this, the ruling class will use this as an opportunity to crush them, accuse them of some nasty crimes and things like that, and really destroy any dissent. And so I think that's a real concern. And so a lot of people are saying we should not be involved, supporters of the idea of being against the COVID regime, we should not be involved in a freedom convoy because it'll be just used against us like January 6th was. But then at the same time, though, what are we supposed to do? Just stay silent? Are we not supposed to protest when these things happen? I mean, obviously we do need to protest. I think personally, from the beginning, I've thought the freedom convoy in the United States should be done at the state capitals, specific state capitals, like, for example, Albany, New York, or Sacramento, California, states where it's been particularly terrible COVID regimes to really work there, because it's not been the federal government that's been the real problem when it comes. Now, they have been the real problem when it comes to Fauci and the CDC giving these guidelines, but it's really been individual states that have been the problem. I mean, Florida has basically ignored the federal government on this, as has Texas, South Carolina, some other places. So I think that would be, and also would keep it from maybe being a federal government crackdown. I think it would be more likely to be successful if you did it in New York, for example. So maybe that's what will happen. We'll have to see. I think a lot of us are nervous. I think most of us are nervous about what's going to happen with the United States Freedom Convoy. Moving to Catholic news, this week there was a story about the Pope meeting with some Fraternity of St. Peter. That's a traditionalist group that is within a regular canonical standing with the Catholic Church, that celebrates the traditional Latin Mass. All of its sacraments are done according to 1962 Missal, and there was a meeting with the Pope and a couple of the representatives of the FSSP, but not the Superior General. I think it was some French priests. I'm not 100% sure about that part. And basically, he wrote a decree, the Pope did, and issued it to them, stating that the faculty to celebrate the sacrifice of the Mass, to minister the sacraments and other sacred rites, and to perform the divine office according to the typical editions of liturgical books enforced in the year 1962 has been granted to the fraternity. Now, this has been a debate because ever since Traditionis Custodes came out back in July of last year, of 2021, there's been a debate about how does this apply to the fraternity and other of these Ecclesia Dei communities, like the fraternity, that their whole charism is to celebrate these traditional rites. Does it apply to them or not? And they stated from the beginning that it did not apply to them. And it looks like the Pope agrees with them. But I mean, the whole thing's a mess, because in December, the head of the CDW, the Congregation of Divine Worship, Archbishop Roche, he declared that it does apply to them. And so I don't think you can get their story straight. And so the fact is, I think we should be thankful for the fact that the Pope did issue this decree. I think it is a little bit odd how it was done. It's not like the fraternity superior general met with them or anything like that, but let's take what we can get. And we should be thankful. And this is good news. It's good news because there's been rumors that the Pope is going to squash the Ecclesia Dei communities with a motu proprio on Ash Wednesday, which is next Wednesday. So that could still happen. Something could still happen. I don't think we should act like it shouldn't. But at least for now, there seems to be a reprieve. I think there's a lot of different ways you could look at this. I think ultimately two things. First is the Pope has actually stated that he wants the Novus Ordo to be the unique expression of the Roman Rite. And there can be debate on what unique means. I think it means only. That he thinks it should be the only expression of the Roman Rite. And so he does not believe, the Pope does not believe that traditional Latin Mass should be celebrated at all. I think he's made that pretty clear, that that's the end goal. He recognizes he can't just abolish it today, but instead what he wants to do is phase it out. And so the fact that he's allowing the fraternity to continue to celebrate traditional Latin Mass does not necessarily mean his ultimate goal has been changed, which is to phase it out. In fact, if you look at the documents that have been issued and the way they've talked about this, the idea has been they want to eliminate the traditional Latin Mass from regular parishes. So your regular parish down the street that celebrates mostly Novus Ordo but has one traditional Latin Mass maybe at 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. They don't want that. A number of the different decrees have made that point, that they don't want to have the traditional Latin Mass at regular parishes. They don't want to infect your normal parishes. But they're going to allow it still at a fraternity parish where the only Mass that's celebrated is a traditional Latin Mass. And so I think that's really still part and parcel with what the overall plan is, because I think if you the term everybody's using is corralling. If you corral all the traditionalists into these parishes, these parishes of the fraternity, and make them leave all the regular parishes, I think even that would satisfy some of their goal, which is to basically try to crush the lifeblood of the traditional movement. Because if you look, I just saw these numbers this morning. I don't have the exact numbers. Most traditional Latin masses, most parishes of traditional Latin masses in the United States are diocesan parishes. Many more. Hundreds are diocesan, and less than 100, I think, are the Ecclesia Dei communities. And so if you did this, if you made it where only the Ecclesia Dei communities could celebrate the traditional Latin Mass, well, then it wouldn't be available to most Catholics, which is exactly what they want. Now, they may then, as phase 2, so to speak, they might want to then eliminate those and crush those communities as well. And maybe something will come out, I don't know, Ash Wednesday, like it's been rumored, that will start that process as well to really restrict those communities. I don't know. I just know for right now, what we do know is that that's good news, that the fraternity, at least for now, is allowed to continue to celebrate 1962. Whether or not this is a corralling strategy that will ultimately end up pushing every traditionalist out of canonical regularity to, like, for example, the Society of St. Pius X or something like that, that remains to be seen. I think we just need to pray and fast and hope that doesn't happen, that the traditional Latin Mass is allowed to flourish as people want it to. I mean, that's the thing. This is an organic growth, the traditional Latin Mass. It's not like this is something from on high. It's literally the exact opposite of what the Vatican tries to do. They try from on high to say, okay, here's how everybody's going to do everything. And nobody wants to do it that way. Nobody wants your synod on synodality or anything like that. And so they just walk away from it. And here's an organic bubbling up of where the people say, this is what we want. We want the traditional Latin Mass. And that's what they try to squash. Okay, let's move on to another story in the Catholic Church. This one is just, okay, this is about the Bishop of Knoxville, Tennessee, Bishop Sticka. Now, anybody who's been online on Twitter and has encountered him on Twitter knows he is a strange bird. I think that I can say that without any fear of correction. He just comes across very odd online. He will tweet things that are very pro-life, very pro-Catholic, things like that. And then he'll tweet other things that are that just are strange. And the way he acts with people online has always been very strange. He will attack certain people. He'll block them for no reason. I mean, honestly, and I think I'll say this, I'm not trying to be super insulting to him. He honestly acts like a teenage girl on Twitter. And that's the only way I can put it. Well, there's been some very disturbing news that has come up from his diocese, and that is he has been sued. He himself and the Diocese of Knoxville has been sued that by a former parish organist who claims that he was raped and sexually harassed by a diocesan employee and seminarian, and that a diocesan investigation into his allegation was impeded by Bishop Sticka. So what happened was there's a young man from Poland who was a member of a student member of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. He came over to the United States, and Bishop Sticka accepted him as a seminarian. But before he entered the seminary, he first was living in the diocese, living with the bishop. And during that time, before he became a seminarian, is when the alleged rape happened in February 2019. And so the diocese was made aware of this, and they had an investigator. However, the bishop got rid of the investigator because he was, quote, asking all these questions during the investigation. Isn't that exactly what an investigator is supposed to do, is ask a bunch of questions? But Bishop Sticka didn't like that. So instead, he appointed a different investigator who basically just interviewed the seminarian who was alleged to have raped the organist. He only interviewed him and basically concluded and said that, okay, nothing happened. And in fact, Bishop Sticka then, according to the accusation, is he allegedly then accused the organist of actually sexually assaulting the young seminarian. And so many things about this are just so strange, because after this, he was still this man's I don't know how to pronounce his last name for sure, but it looks like Sabzuk. He basically went to the seminary, still went to seminary for Knoxville, and there he was accused again of more sexual harassment. And so eventually he was dismissed from the seminary in February 2021. So this is 2 years later. But after he was dismissed, he was just said it was for a discernment period. And he continued to live with Bishop Sticka, and in fact went on vacation with him, a 10-day road trip, taken along with Cardinal Justin Regali. And Cardinal Justin Regali comes in this because he's also been living with Bishop Sticka for years. In fact, there's these creepy Christmas cards they send out, the two of them with Christmas tree with their dogs saying, "Here are our girls," and stuff like that. It's just very odd. And so this happened afterwards. So ultimately what we have here is allegations that a young man from Poland came to Knoxville, allegedly raped an organist, a male organist, had sexual harassment accusations against him back in Poland, then he goes on the seminary and has them there again, the Knoxville Seminary, which is actually up in Indiana. He has accusations against him again, more homosexual sexual harassment. During this time, not when he's in seminary, but before and after he's in seminary, he's living with Bishop Sticka, goes on vacation with Bishop Sticka. I think we all know, I know what we're all thinking here about Bishop Sticka. The fact is that he has a man who's been accused multiple times of homosexual sexual assault, harassment and assault, living with him, going on vacation with him. I think this is just a mess, and it's not, honestly, I hate to say this, but it's not that surprising that a bishop of the Catholic Church today would be in a situation like this. I think ultimately Bishop Sticka has to go. He has to be removed immediately, as quickly as possible. He's so clearly not doing his duties, and he also, let's be honest, is clearly has some problems in his personal life, and he needs to be removed for the good of the church. And hopefully that'll happen. He's only 62, which means he's got another 13 years before he has to offer his resignation. So we'll see what happens with that story, but it's a very disturbing one and a very strange one, honestly. The last thing I just wanted to bring up in news, which is really just personal news for me, it's February 25th, and today, 30 years ago today, I decided to become Catholic. And so I have an article about that in Crisis Magazine today. I ask you to check it out. It's obviously a big deal for me, not necessarily for all of you. It's a big deal for my family. My wife would never have married me if I were not Catholic. We were not dating at the time that I decided to become Catholic. I knew her, but we were just friends. We weren't dating because she wouldn't date a non-Catholic. She's a smart Catholic girl. And so we obviously got married in the Catholic Church, and then all our kids are Catholic, so they can be thankful for that as well. But I just want to say I don't regret for a second being Catholic. I know at Crisis, we often have criticisms of the Catholic Church, not of the Catholic Church, but of the church leaders and of how the Catholic Church is being run. But it's always done from a basis of love and devotion to the Catholic Church, that we want to see the Catholic Church spread throughout the world, bring every single soul to Jesus Christ in the Catholic Church. And the things that impede that from happening, we resist here at Crisis. We do not want anything to do. We want to fight against anything that keeps that goal from happening, that keeps the proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ in the Catholic Church from spreading throughout the world. And all these crises that are happening within the church and the world, they impede that. That's why we resist it. So that's why we're here. And I just asked you maybe say a prayer for me, and also, but more importantly, pray for peace in Ukraine, and also pray for the Catholic Church, that it might spread the gospel to the ends of the earth. Okay, everybody, God love you.